What if every thought you've ever believed was yours wasn't actually coming from you? What if the constant mental chatter you've been identifying with your entire life is just static you're picking up, not signals you're creating? I'm going to show you something discovered in neurology wards that most people never see. A specific brain pattern that appears 72 hours before spontaneous healing, before impossible breakthroughs, before reality shifts in ways science can't explain. And this pattern? Complete silence in the part of your brain responsible for thinking about the future. The patients who healed weren't the ones fighting hardest with positive thoughts. They were the ones who stopped identifying with thoughts entirely. When you realize thoughts aren't yours, when you recognize you're the awareness observing them instead of the voice speaking them, your electromagnetic field stops broadcasting chaos and starts emanating coherence. And reality, which has been responding to your thought patterns this whole time, suddenly responds to something far more powerful, the spacious awareness beneath all thinking. This is the shift that changes everything.
There's something happening in your mind right now that you've never questioned, a constant stream of thoughts flowing through your awareness. And you've spent your entire life assuming these thoughts are you, that they originate from you, that they define who you are. But what I'm about to reveal will fundamentally alter your relationship with reality itself. And once you see this, you can never unsee it. The recognition changes everything. Take a moment right now and simply observe your thinking. Don't try to control it. Don't try to stop it. Just watch. Notice how thoughts appear in your awareness without your conscious permission. You didn't decide to think the thought you just had. It simply arose, fully formed, in the space of your consciousness. And here's the question that breaks the entire illusion. If you didn't consciously generate that thought, where did it come from? Most people go their entire lives never asking this question. They experience thoughts and immediately identify with them. I'm thinking this, therefore this is me. But neuroscientists have discovered something that spiritual traditions have known for thousands of years. By the time you become consciously aware of a thought, your brain has already been processing it for approximately 300 to 500 milliseconds. You're not generating thoughts. You're receiving them, observing them after they've already been constructed by unconscious processes you have no direct access to. This isn't just philosophical speculation. This is measurable, verifiable science. In the 1980s, researcher Benjamin Libet conducted experiments that proved conscious awareness of a decision occurs after the brain has already initiated the action. What you experience as your choice, your thought, your decision, is actually a post hoc rationalization of processes that happened before you were consciously aware of them. Let that penetrate deeply. The voice in your head that you've been calling I is not generating original content. It's narrating content that's being fed to it from unconscious processing systems. And here's where this becomes revolutionary for how you experience reality. When you believe thoughts are yours, you give them immense power. Every thought that arises carries the weight of your identity. If a fearful thought appears, you become afraid. If an angry thought emerges, you become angry. If a limiting thought surfaces, you believe it defines your limitations. But the moment you recognize that thoughts are not yours, that they're simply phenomena arising in consciousness, like clouds passing through the sky, everything shifts. You stop being controlled by thinking and start observing it. And reality, which has been responding to your unconscious identification with thought patterns, begins responding to something deeper, something more authentic, something that was always there beneath the noise. I want you to try something right now that will give you direct experience of what I'm describing. This isn't theory. This is experiential verification. For the next 60 seconds, I want you to try not to think. Seriously, pause for a moment. Set a timer for 60 seconds and attempt to have zero thoughts, just awareness, no thinking. Try it now before continuing. What happened? If you're honest, you'll notice that thoughts kept appearing despite your intention not to have them. You might have had 10 seconds of stillness. Then suddenly, a thought about what you're going to eat later, or a memory from yesterday, or a judgment about this exercise itself. The thoughts appeared uninvited, unwanted, and completely outside your conscious control. This simple experiment proves something profound. If you can't control whether thoughts appear, then you are not the source of thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear. This distinction seems subtle, but it's the difference between being trapped in mental patterns and being free from them. Here's the practical application that most people miss. Once you recognize you're not the thinker, you can stop arguing with your thoughts. Right now, you probably have an ongoing relationship with your thinking where you believe some thoughts, reject other thoughts, try to control certain thoughts, and feel guilty about particular thoughts. It's exhausting because you're treating thoughts as if they're you, making definitive statements about reality. But what if thoughts are more like a radio that's always playing in the background? Sometimes it plays music you like. Sometimes it plays static. Sometimes it broadcasts fear, anxiety, and limitation. The radio doesn't define you. You're the awareness that hears the radio. And just like you can change channels on a radio without identifying with what was playing before, you can let thoughts pass without identifying with their content. In the comments, drop one word that captures the energy you're choosing to carry forward. Maybe it's clarity. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's freedom. Maybe it's something uniquely yours. Let that word be a small but profound declaration, a signal you plant not just in this space, but in the quantum field itself. I'm giving away 2 one-on-one free sessions to help you embody this shift. Be honest. Be you. For the next 7 days, practice this every morning for 5 minutes. Sit comfortably and simply observe your thoughts. Every time a thought appears, mentally label it, not with judgment, just with accurate description. Planning thought, memory thought, worry thought, fantasy thought, judgment thought. Don't engage with the content. Don't follow the thought stream. Just label and let it pass. What you'll notice by day 3 or 4 is that there's a gap between you and your thoughts. You're not the thoughts. You're the spacious awareness that can observe thoughts arising and dissolving. This creates what neuroscientists call metacognitive awareness, the ability to think about your thinking, to observe your mental processes from a position that's not entangled with them. And once this metacognitive awareness stabilizes, reality starts responding to you differently because you're no longer broadcasting the chaotic frequency of unconscious thought identification. Now that you understand thoughts aren't yours, let's go deeper into where they actually come from. Because once you trace thoughts back to their source, you gain the ability to change what types of thoughts arise in your consciousness, which changes what reality you experience. Your brain operates like a prediction machine. It's constantly trying to anticipate what's going to happen next based on what's happened before. Every experience you've ever had gets encoded into neural networks, pattern recognition systems that fire automatically when similar circumstances arise. These patterns generate thoughts that seem to be about your current situation, but are actually replaying old interpretations, old fears, old beliefs from past experiences. This is why you keep having the same thoughts over and over. They're not fresh responses to new circumstances. They're automated patterns running on loops. And you've been identifying with these loops as if they're your original, authentic responses to life. Let me give you a specific example. Imagine you're about to have a difficult conversation with someone. Before the conversation even happens, thoughts start appearing in your awareness. This is going to be uncomfortable. They're going to get defensive. I should prepare what I'm going to say. What if they reject what I'm asking for? These thoughts feel like they're you preparing for the conversation. But here's what's actually happening. Your brain is accessing memories of previous difficult conversations, extracting patterns from those experiences, and generating predictions about this upcoming conversation based on those old patterns. The thoughts aren't responding to the present moment. They're replaying the past and projecting it onto the future. And because you identify with these thoughts as yours, you enter the conversation already carrying the frequency of past difficult conversations. Your nervous system is activated before anything has happened. Your body language broadcasts defensiveness or anxiety, and the other person unconsciously picks up on this frequency and responds accordingly, which then confirms the thoughts that preceded the conversation. You've created a self-fulfilling prophecy by identifying with thoughts that were never about the present moment to begin with. Here's how to break this pattern. For the next 14 days, whenever you notice a repetitive thought pattern, especially one that creates emotional charge, do this practice. Stop and ask, when is the first time I remember thinking this exact thought or feeling this exact way? Don't force an answer. Just hold the question in your awareness and let your memory systems respond. Often, you'll trace the thought back to a specific experience, usually from childhood or adolescence, a moment when something happened that installed a belief, a fear, a pattern of self-protection. The thought you're having now isn't about your current situation. It's that old experience replaying itself through new circumstances. Once you identify the source, you do something revolutionary. You recognize that the thought is not a response to what's happening now. It's an echo from the past. And echoes have no power except the power you give them by believing their current reality. Write down what you discover. The thought, "I'm not good enough," originates from being compared to my sibling at age 8. This thought is not about my current capabilities. It's an old recording playing. This awareness alone begins to dissolve the thought's power because you've stopped identifying it as your authentic response. You've recognized it as outdated programming. And outdated programming can be updated. Before we go deeper, I want to invite you into something real. If you've been feeling like something's clicking, if a part of you is recognizing your own power, tap that like button if you just had an aha moment. Because like attracts like. Hit subscribe. Stay with this space. Grow with us. Join the Manifestation Club. Links in the description. This isn't just a channel. It's a frequency. If you felt a shift while watching, you're already tuned in. Now let's connect this to how reality responds to you. Because this is where understanding becomes transformation. Your thoughts, despite not being originally yours, create an electromagnetic frequency that broadcasts from your nervous system into the field around you. This isn't mysticism. This is documented science. The HeartMath Institute has measured the electromagnetic field generated by your heart, which extends 8 to 10 feet from your body in all directions. This field carries information about your internal state, and it's constantly being read by other people's nervous systems, by animals, by plants, and by what quantum physicists call the zero-point field, the underlying energetic substrate of reality itself. When you identify with your thoughts, believing they're you, your electromagnetic field broadcasts the frequency of those thoughts. If you're thinking anxious thoughts and identifying with them, your field broadcasts anxiety. If you're thinking limiting thoughts and believing them, your field broadcasts limitation. And reality, which is not separate from you but rather a responsive field that you're embedded in, organizes itself around the frequency you're broadcasting. This is why people can do all the manifestation work, all the visualization, all the affirmations, and still experience the same patterns. They're trying to broadcast a new frequency through conscious intention, while their unconscious identification with thought patterns is broadcasting a much stronger, more consistent signal that contradicts their intentions. But here's what changes when you stop identifying with thoughts. Your electromagnetic broadcast is no longer dominated by mental patterns. Instead, it starts emanating from a deeper place, from the awareness itself, from the spaciousness that exists before thinking begins. And this frequency is coherent, stable, and powerful in ways that thought-based frequencies can never be. Think of it like this. Thoughts create a chaotic, fluctuating frequency, constantly changing based on what thought arises next. But awareness, the space in which thoughts appear, has a consistent, coherent frequency. It's like the difference between trying to broadcast a clear radio signal while someone's constantly changing the channel, versus broadcasting from a stable frequency that maintains its coherence regardless of what content is playing. This practice trains you to shift your identity from thought to awareness, which shifts your electromagnetic broadcast from chaos to coherence. Practice this twice daily for 10 minutes, morning and evening. Sit in a quiet space and close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths. Then let your breathing return to its natural rhythm. Now, instead of trying to stop thoughts or control them, simply notice that you're aware of them. There's a thought appearing, and there's awareness of that thought. Shift your attention from the thought itself to the awareness that's observing it. Ask yourself, what is this awareness that's noticing my thoughts? Where is it located? What does it feel like? You'll probably notice that awareness doesn't have a location. It's not in your head or in your body. It's more like a spacious presence that thoughts appear within. Rest in the recognition of this awareness, not as a concept, but as direct experience. Thoughts will keep arising. That's fine. Each time a thought appears, notice that you're aware of it. Then shift your attention back to the awareness itself. You're training your nervous system to identify with awareness rather than with the content arising in awareness. After 10 minutes, open your eyes. But here's the crucial part that most people miss. Try to maintain that awareness as you move through your day. When you're talking to someone, notice that you're aware of the conversation. When you're eating, notice that you're aware of eating. When thoughts arise, notice that you're aware of thoughts. This creates what I call awareness momentum. The more you practice recognizing yourself as awareness rather than as thoughts, the more your electromagnetic field broadcasts from that coherent space rather than from chaotic thought patterns. And reality responds to this coherent broadcast with synchronicities, opportunities, and experiences that were impossible when you were broadcasting from thought identification. Here's where this gets even more profound, even more paradigm shifting. Not only are thoughts not originally yours, many of them aren't even generated by your individual brain. You're accessing what could be called a collective thought field, and most people have no idea this is happening. Have you ever noticed that certain thoughts seem to be more prevalent during certain times? Entire populations suddenly concerned about the same topics, experiencing similar fears, sharing common obsessions. This isn't coincidence. This is evidence of collective thought fields that individual consciousnesses tap into and mistake for personal thinking. Researchers studying collective consciousness have found measurable correlations between global events and random number generator outputs across the planet. When something significant happens that captures mass attention, random number generators that should produce completely random sequences start showing non-random patterns, as if the collective focus is influencing probability fields at a quantum level. What this suggests is that consciousness is not isolated in individual brains. It's more like individual receivers tuning into a broader field of consciousness that contains thought patterns, belief systems, and emotional frequencies shared across populations. You can verify this in your own experience. Pay attention to your thoughts over the next few days. Notice how many of them are about things you're not directly experiencing. Concerns about the economy you read about in news, worries about global events that don't affect your immediate life, opinions about people you've never met. These thoughts didn't generate from your direct experience. They entered your awareness from the collective thought field, and you adopted them as if they were your original thoughts. This is simultaneously disturbing and liberating. Disturbing because it means you've been even less in control of your thinking than you realized. Liberating because once you recognize you're accessing collective thought fields, you can choose which fields to tune into and which to tune out. In the comments, drop a word, a single word that represents what you're ready to release. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's doubt, maybe it's conformity. Whatever it is, call it out. Not for me, but for you. Because naming what you're letting go is the first step in dissolving it. For the next 21 days, practice this investigation every evening. Take 10 minutes to review your day and categorize your thoughts into 3 types: Type 1. Direct experience thoughts. Thoughts arising from what you're actually experiencing in the moment. This coffee is hot. I'm feeling tired. That sunset is beautiful. These are responses to direct sensory input. Type 2. Personal history thoughts. Thoughts arising from your individual past experiences and memories. These are the patterns we discussed earlier. Replays of old programming specific to your life. Type 3. Collective field thoughts. Thoughts about things you're not directly experiencing, but have absorbed from media, conversations, cultural narratives. Concerns about things happening in distant places. Opinions about situations you've never encountered. Beliefs about how life works that you adopted from others. Write down examples from each category. What you'll discover is that type 3 thoughts, collective field thoughts, probably comprise 60 to 70% of your daily thinking. You've been spending most of your mental energy processing thoughts that have nothing to do with your actual life, your direct experience, or your authentic responses to reality. Once you see this clearly, you can make a revolutionary choice. You can stop engaging with type 3 thoughts entirely. When a thought arises about something you're not directly experiencing, something you absorbed from the collective field, you simply let it pass without engagement. You don't suppress it, you don't fight it, you just don't invest attention in it. This practice alone can reduce your mental noise by more than half, which means your electromagnetic broadcast becomes dramatically clearer. You're no longer amplifying collective fears, collective limitations, collective patterns. You're broadcasting from your direct experience and your awareness itself. Now let's make this extremely practical by showing you exactly how reality starts responding differently once you stop identifying with thoughts. Because this isn't just about peace of mind or spiritual awakening. This is about fundamentally changing what shows up in your actual lived experience. Reality operates as a responsive field, not a fixed objective structure. Quantum physics has proven that observation affects outcomes at the subatomic level. But what most people don't understand is that this isn't limited to laboratories. The same mechanism operates at every scale, including the scale of your daily life. When you identify with thoughts, you're observing reality through the lens of those thoughts. If you're thinking and believing relationships are difficult, you're observing reality through that filter. And reality, being responsive to observation, organizes itself to match that observation. You notice the difficulties in relationships. You unconsciously gravitate toward relationship dynamics that confirm the difficulty. You interpret neutral situations as confirming your thought pattern. But here's what happens when you stop identifying with that thought. When the thought relationships are difficult arises, and you recognize it as just a thought, not as truth, not as your authentic knowing. You're no longer observing reality through that filter. The thought can be present in your awareness without you believing it, without you broadcasting it as your operating frequency. From this space of non-identification, you're observing reality more directly, without the distortion of thought-based filters. And what you'll discover is that reality is far more fluid, far more responsive, far more filled with possibility than your thoughts ever suggested. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. Let's say you've been thinking money is hard to make for years. This thought creates an observation filter that causes you to notice all the evidence supporting it. You see the effort required. You notice when opportunities don't work out. You feel the struggle of financial pressure. But you're not consciously choosing to create this experience. You're simply identified with a thought pattern that's observing reality through a specific lens. And reality is organizing itself to match that observation, because that's how the responsive field works. Now watch what happens when you stop identifying with that thought. The thought money is hard to make arises, but instead of believing it, you recognize it as a thought, a pattern possibly inherited from parents, possibly absorbed from collective fields, definitely not the ultimate truth about reality. From this non-identified position, you're no longer locked into observing reality through that filter. you become available to notice different aspects of reality. Opportunities that were always there, but filtered out by your thought-based lens become visible. Synchronicities that were always occurring, but dismissed as coincidence, register in your awareness. Actions that feel aligned become obvious, where before you only saw actions that required struggle. This isn't positive thinking. You're not replacing money as hard to make with money as easy to make. You're dissolving identification with both thoughts and observing reality from awareness itself, which has no predetermined filters about how money works. This is a 30-day practice that will give you direct, measurable evidence of reality responding differently once you stop identifying with thoughts. Here's exactly how to do it. Week 1. Baseline documentation. Every evening, write down 3 recurring thoughts you notice during the day, particularly thoughts about limitations, difficulties, or how reality works. Don't try to change them, just document them. Also, write down 3 things that happened that day in the areas those thoughts concern. If your recurring thought is about relationships being difficult, document 3 things that happened in relationships. Week 2. Pattern recognition. Review your Week 1 documentation. Look for correlations between your recurring thoughts and what actually happened. You'll likely see that reality organized itself around your thought patterns. The thought "people don't listen to me" was followed by multiple experiences of feeling unheard. The thought "opportunities don't come to me" was followed by missed opportunities or none appearing. Week 3. Non-identification practice. Now you practice non-identification. When those same recurring thoughts arise, use this exact internal response. That's a thought. I notice it. I don't need to believe it or disbelieve it. It's just a thought passing through awareness. Don't try to change the thought. Don't replace it with a positive thought. Simply recognize it as a thought and let it pass without identifying with it. Continue documenting what happens in your day. Week 4. Reality shift documentation. By week 4, if you've been genuinely practicing non-identification, you'll notice reality responding differently. The areas where you had recurring limiting thoughts will start showing different outcomes, not because you forced anything, but because you stopped filtering reality through limiting thought patterns, which allowed reality's responsiveness to organize around a clearer observation. Write down specific examples of how reality responded differently. Be precise. In week 1, I had the thought "people don't listen to me" 7 times and experienced 4 situations where I felt unheard. In week 4, the same thought arose 5 times, but I practiced non-identification and I experienced 3 situations where I felt genuinely heard and understood. This journal becomes concrete evidence that reality responds to your relationship with thoughts, not to the thoughts themselves. Everything I've shared so far leads to this crucial point. If thoughts aren't you, and thoughts have been the primary thing you've been identifying with, then who are you? This question isn't philosophical abstraction. This is the most practical question you can ask, because your identity determines your frequency, and your frequency determines your experience. Most people construct their identity from thoughts. "I'm someone who struggles with anxiety" is just a thought you've believed and identified with so consistently that it became your sense of self. "I'm not good with money" is a thought that became an identity. "I'm unlucky in relationships" is a thought-based identity structure. When you stop identifying with thoughts, these identity structures begin to dissolve, and this can feel destabilizing at first because you've been using these structures to navigate reality, even if they were limiting you. But what emerges in the space where thought-based identity used to be is something far more authentic, far more powerful, far more aligned with how consciousness actually operates. You discover that your true identity is not any thought about who you are. Your true identity is the awareness itself. The consciousness that can observe any thought, any emotion, any experience without being defined by it. And this awareness-based identity broadcasts a completely different frequency than thought-based identity. Thought-based identity is always seeking, always comparing, always trying to maintain or improve itself through experience. It needs constant validation from reality to prove it exists, to confirm it's valuable, to demonstrate it's worthy. This creates a desperate, needy frequency that repels the very things you're trying to attract. But awareness-based identity doesn't need anything from reality because it's already complete. It's not trying to become anything because it recognizes itself as the unchanging space in which all becoming occurs. This creates a frequency of sufficiency, of wholeness, of inherent okayness that magnetizes aligned experiences because it's no longer broadcasting lack or desperation. This is advanced work, but if you've been doing the previous exercises, you're ready for it. This protocol will shift your identity from thought-based to awareness-based in a way that's tangible and experiential. Phase 1. Identity Inventory. Days 1 to 7. Make a list of every I am statement you habitually think or say. I am anxious. I am creative. I am struggling financially. I am looking for love. I am trying to build a business. Write at least 20 statements. These are your current identity structures, all thought-based. Phase 2. Source Investigation. Days 8 to 14. Take each I am statement and ask, is this what I am, or is this a thought about what I am? Feel the difference between being something and thinking you're something. For example, I am anxious feels solid and defining. But I'm having anxious thoughts recognizes the thoughts without identifying with them. Rewrite each statement from identity to observation. I am struggling financially becomes I'm observing thoughts about financial struggle. Phase 3. Awareness Recognition. Days 15 to 21. Now practice this inquiry daily. Sit quietly and ask, what am I if I'm not my thoughts? Don't answer intellectually. Drop into direct experience. You'll notice you're aware. You're the presence that can observe thoughts, feelings, sensations, experiences. Rest in this recognition for 15 minutes daily. Phase 4. Identity Embodiment. Days 22 to 30. Now practice moving through your day from awareness identity rather than thought identity. When someone asks how you are, instead of responding from thought-based identity, like, I'm stressed about work, respond from awareness identity. I'm noticing a lot is moving in my life right now. When making decisions, instead of deciding from thought patterns like, I should do this because, decide from awareness. What action feels aligned from this spacious place? What happens through this protocol is not that you lose your personality or become some emotionless spiritual robot. What happens is you stop being limited by thought-based identity structures. You become more fluid, more responsive, more authentic, because you're not defending or maintaining an identity that was never real to begin with. Everything we've explored points to this integration. Reality doesn't respond to your thoughts, and reality doesn't respond to you stopping your thoughts. Reality responds to the quality of awareness you're observing from, and that quality shifts dramatically when you stop identifying with thoughts as you. This is why monks who've meditated for decades in caves don't necessarily transform their external circumstances, while some people have profound reality shifts after just a few weeks of practice. It's not about how many hours you meditate. It's about whether you've actually shifted from thought identification to awareness recognition in your lived experience. You can sit in meditation for hours and still be identified with thoughts. You're just identified with quieter thoughts, spiritual thoughts, thoughts about how peaceful you are. But if you're moving through your daily life from awareness, identity, even for 5 minutes at a time, you're broadcasting a completely different frequency that reality responds to immediately. Let me share what this looks like in practical terms across different life areas so you can recognize the shift happening in your own experience. In relationships, thought identification creates relationships where you're constantly managing how the other person perceives you, where conflict feels threatening to your identity, where you need the relationship to validate your worth. Awareness identity creates relationships where you can be genuinely present without needing anything, where conflict is just sensation and thought patterns passing through without defining you, where connection happens naturally without effort. In work and creativity, thought identification makes work feel like proof of your value, makes creative blocks feel like personal failure, makes success necessary to validate your worth. Awareness identity allows work to flow through you without defining you, allows creative blocks to be observed without resistance, allows success or failure to be experiences rather than identity statements. In health, thought identification creates chronic stress because every sensation gets interpreted as meaning something about you. Every symptom becomes a threat to your identity. Awareness identity allows your nervous system to relax because sensations can be present without meaning anything about who you are, allowing your body's natural intelligence to regulate more effectively. In finances, thought identification creates financial anxiety because money becomes proof of your value or lack thereof. Every transaction carries identity weight. Awareness identity allows money to flow more naturally because it's no longer carrying the burden of proving your worth. It's just energy moving through your experience. The pattern is consistent across every area. When you're identified with thoughts, reality has to constantly confirm or deny your thought-based identity, which creates resistance, struggle, and limitation. When you're identified with awareness, reality can organize itself around the coherent frequency of that awareness without being filtered through limiting thought patterns. This final practice integrates everything we've covered into a daily rhythm that maintains the awareness identity shift you've been developing. Practice this every morning for 20 minutes minimum. Minutes 1 to 5, awareness recognition. Sit comfortably and recognize that you're aware, not thinking about awareness, directly noticing the aware presence that's here right now. Rest as that awareness. Minutes 6 to 10, thought observation. Allow thoughts to arise. Don't stop them. Don't control them. Practice observing them from awareness without identifying with them. Label them if helpful. Planning thought, worry thought, memory thought. Notice the space between thoughts. Minutes 11 to 15, sensation observation. Bring attention to physical sensations in your body. Notice how sensations arise and dissolve in awareness, just like thoughts do. Practice feeling sensations without creating meaning about them. Just awareness observing sensation. Minutes 16 to 20, reality preview. From this space of awareness, identity, not from thought patterns, preview your day, not visualizing what you want to happen, but feeling into what actions want to emerge from this spacious awareness. What wants to happen through you today? Not what you think should happen, but what arises naturally from awareness. Then move into your day maintaining as much awareness identity as possible. Every time you notice you've collapsed back into thought identification, which will happen repeatedly, that's normal. Simply recognize it and return to awareness. Not as failure, just as the practice of remembering what you actually are. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground, but it all comes down to one simple recognition that you can verify in your direct experience right now. Thoughts are not you. They arise in awareness. They dissolve in awareness. And awareness itself is what you actually are. This isn't a belief you need to adopt. This is a direct recognition available in this moment, right now. Notice that you're aware of hearing these words, that awareness is not a thought. It's what thoughts appear in. It's what you actually are beneath every thought pattern, every identity structure, every story about who you're supposed to be. And when you live from this recognition, when you stop giving thoughts the power of identity, reality responds to the coherent frequency of awareness itself, rather than the chaotic frequency of thought identification. Synchronicities multiply, opportunities appear, resources flow, not because you manifested them through technique, but because you stopped filtering reality through limiting thought patterns that were broadcasting lack and limitation. The moment you realize thoughts aren't yours is the moment reality can finally respond to what you actually are rather than what you think you are. And what you actually are is vast, creative, coherent consciousness temporarily experiencing itself through this particular human form. Everything shifts from here, not gradually through years of practice, but immediately, as soon as you recognize what's actually true. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness observing them. And that awareness is broadcasting a frequency that reality has been waiting to respond to your entire life. The only question remaining is, will you continue living from the limited identity of thought patterns? Or will you recognize yourself as the unlimited awareness that thoughts appear within? Reality is waiting for your answer, not your thought about your answer, but the frequency you broadcast through the recognition of what you actually are. You are not your thoughts. You never were. And the moment you truly realize this, everything changes. Make sure you share this video with someone who's trapped in their own thinking. For you, it may be just sharing. But for someone exhausted from battling their thoughts, someone who believes every anxious or limiting thought is the truth about who they are, this might be the recognition that sets them free. Your sharing spreads awareness, and that liberated energy amplifies everything you're manifesting. Be the friend who shares awakening. Pass this on if you felt something shift.